Welcome into another episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast. Erik Skopil here on a actually decent, like if the game was played today, I think we'd all be a little happier kind of morning here on Monday out in Eugene. Joined by a special guest, first time on the show. I've been on his show a dozen times, I think. It's Locked On Ducks, Spencer McLaughlin. Spence, great to see you. One of my favorite guys chopping up about the Ducks. This is going to be a fun show.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I love mailbag questions. I have not seen these. I've got no idea. I have even more prep for the mailbag questions on my show than these. So I am more than a little fired up for it.
I was listening to your podcast back yesterday, and I think we saw things very similarly. So I will be curious to see if we're kind of on the same page with some of these questions. We're going to start with this one from at Big Duck Energy. Full question here. I'll let you get part of it on the screen there. Do we really know yet who this team is? It's been hard to figure out who this team is versus other top teams. Penn State is a question mark in hindsight. Indiana beat them pretty well, and they haven't played other teams to accurately gauge them. Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thanks for the question. I've got my own question. Yeah, I think this is reasonable. I think it's reasonable to wonder how good this team is yet. I also think we've seen the highs be so freaking high that I don't doubt that in the right matchups, everything clicking, this team can be competitive with anybody. I also feel like we've seen a lot of young team energy here of just kind of the riding the wave, the ups and downs of it. And the lows have been a little bit more frequent and a little bit lower than maybe I'd anticipated. What do you think?
I think that there is something to that. I think specifically with Dante Moore this past week, Oregon fans, I think, should be getting a growing appreciation for Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix's experience the last couple of years. Like Dante Moore is making mistakes, mostly just not seeing the field as well as especially Bo Nix did. You know, Gabriel didn't always have the ability to use the middle of the field a ton because he was a little smaller, but still, Gabriel made a lot of really good reads. Obviously, he had some bad ones in the red zone last year too, but play to play, week to week, it felt like there was a higher level of consistency. And one of the questions and reservations I had about the season was, you know, you've got a quarterback now that is going to go through some growing pains, and we're just seeing that in real time. I think that's part of the reason that the offense struggled early on Saturday. The rain started 7:40 to go in the second quarter, Erik, and you can't judge the offense after that. You really can't. I mean, it's like trying to pick up a wet watermelon, and Wisconsin's dealing with it too. And what do you know? They struggled. But I also want to go back to something that I just keep seeing over and over. The retconning of the Indiana game as if Oregon just got completely blasted, dominated, outplayed, controlled. I just can't get behind that. It was 20-20 in the fourth quarter, and then Indiana goes down and they score a go-ahead touchdown. It was offensive pass interference, whatever. They would have made a field goal. Like, they would have taken the lead. Oregon's offense didn't score. Like, full credit to Indiana in that spot. But I've been hearing this from a lot of national hosts like Joel Klatt, like, oh, Indiana just really controlled Oregon. Like, they didn't. That was a close competitive game the entire time. Oregon's like 2 or 3 plays from flipping that around and going and winning that one. So did they play well? No. They did not. Indiana's also really, really good. I still think the Penn State is as big as it felt in the moment, and they just killed Penn State's season this year. So I think there is something to that first part of the question. Do we know who the Oregon team is? Not entirely. I know what the potential is, but where's the floor? I think we're going to find out what the floor truly is in this 4-game stretch in November.
It's one other thing here, kind of changing the subject, staying on it. It was something I wanted to hit. I don't think he's going to come up later. I do wonder, and of course, the first quarter was a mess, but there's a couple of plays in rewatching it that stood out to me that I wonder kind of like what happens if it goes a little different. Like if Kenyon Sadiq doesn't drop that pass on that first drive, do they get some momentum? Do they score? Do they start to feel it? Does Wisconsin kind of start to feel like there's a little bit more pressure on them? Jordan Davison has a screen pass on, I think it was 3rd and 5. Slips on the turf a little bit. Looks like maybe if he would have got his feet under him, he could have picked up a first or gotten close. There's just some of these moments early in the game, and I'm not suggesting it goes completely differently, but there's just a couple moments here or there, especially offensively in that first quarter where they were just really close to maybe it being a different outcome on that play, and that may have opened the door to being a different outcome later in that drive. But it did just feel like because it was like 20 yards gained in the first quarter. Understandably, people are losing their minds, but not that we're going to get any fire Will Stein comments on this show here. That's we're a Will Stein pro podcast, clearly. But
Apparently.
I also wanted to put that out there that like there is been a sentiment that like things were just terrible, and they were, but there was also just a couple of really close encounters where it's like it just goes a little differently. If it's just if Kenyon catches the ball, if Jordan can stay upright, maybe it goes a little bit different. I just wanted to put that out there kind of in response to everybody suggesting how the lows are really low, which I totally can understand and get behind. I thought this game on Saturday was going to go differently than it did, especially early. But kind of wanted to put that out there. It's been something I've been thinking about since rewatching.
Yeah, and I think you can even go back to the Indiana game and that Jamari Johnson drop on that drive in the first quarter. It just the momentum, and when you've got a young team like Oregon, maybe it's a sign that they're not as good at responding from those mistakes. I think that's a valid point to raise with how the offense is played in these moments, that they're operating on that thin of a margin. But I mean, momentum is a real thing. Momentum is a real thing for an offense, for players, for a play caller, for a defense as well. When you feel things can just start to snowball and you just kind of miss that intensity, and you can just start to feel things get out of control. And Oregon just hasn't been able to be consistent in those specific moments, and then they haven't responded well after the fact. Because I saw the same thing. That I thought Kenyon Sadiq played his worst game of the year by far, because he's been great all year, and on Saturday he was decidedly not. There was the drop. There was another missed block that he had. He almost missed a block, but recovered it on the long toss run from Noah Whittington. He and Jamari Johnson, you hate to put the blame on just two guys because the Wisconsin player also made a play, but when Dante Moore got hurt, those guys are coming across on a counter, and the guy that makes the play is right there, and they both just run by him. I have no idea which one was in the wrong, but like there were just so many moments like that where it wasn't a whole-scale collapse on offense, but it was one guy. And when you're playing a conference team, even one as bad as Wisconsin, that's got a certain baseline of talent, you're not able to get away with those sorts of things. And I think in the run game in particular, Oregon cleaned that up in the second half. But I think in the first half and in a couple of other moments, it was just one guy. And it's like, if this play, or if that individual rep gets one, then a 2-yard loss is a 12-yard gain. And I think there were just too many of those moments. Like, they have to clean that sort of stuff up and, run in the first half the way they did in the second. But yeah, I didn't feel like upon rewatching they were really that far away, but certainly they were the results were not where they needed to be.
And building off that, and then we'll get to question number 2 here. I think Dante Moore is a bit of a rhythm quarterback. And I don't know if he ever felt like he got into a rhythm. And then the weather kind of impacted what the play calling, what the strategy was. I was impressed with the throw to Jeremiah McClellan on third down that kept that 99-yard drive going, by the way. That was a nice read. I think that was like a second or third read. Going through the progression, throws a good ball, good catch by McClellan on the sideline. But in general, it felt like, and again, that's why I go back to that Sadiq drop. It felt like that was maybe where they get some rhythm, or he gets into some momentum. Not that the throw was bad by any means, but you brought it up, and I think it's definitely fair. I've heard it kind of brought up by numerous people around the program of just like, this is a young football team, young players. To steal a basketball term, sometimes you need to see the ball go through the basket. And if you get an easy completion there, even on a screen pass, it's not a difficult throw by any means. You kind of start to feel a little bit of momentum building, and they just never felt like they had any momentum, never felt like they had any sort of rhythm in that game.
Yeah, and it does at some level fall on Will Stein, because Oregon is running the ball with too much success for the offense to feel and look as disjointed as it does. Like, when you had against Indiana 3 backs at over 5 yards a carry, and they ran for over 200 against Wisconsin, that matches with, those weren't garbage time stats. And I just think of that and then look at the way the offense plays and go, man, when you can run the ball that well, why is it so difficult at times to get up and down the field? Like that, I think is where Will Stein has to be able to improve. The number of times Oregon gets ahead of the chains and then winds up like way ahead of the chains on first down to, in theory, stay on schedule, and then winds up not getting a first down or not getting any points on the drive if they're in good position, like after the onside kick. I think that happens way too often.
This is probably a surprise to some this is the Big Ten's #1 rush offense, both in totality, rush yards per game, but also
That doesn't shock me at all.
But in terms of just like what the expectation with the Will Stein offense is going into a season in the Big Ten Conference, the fact that they lead the conference and are second nationally in yards per carry, and that they're also yards per game tops in the conference by a decent margin, like 7 yards over Indiana. And then there's only 4 teams averaging more than 200 yards, and they're 37 yards above that. I totally agree. Like the rush offense is clearly what's working
really
best
good
right now, and it's working at a level that is among the best nationally. Like I said, second nationally in rush yards per carry, only behind Navy, which doesn't throw the ball really at all, but somehow still is able to churn out 6.46 yards per carry. Pretty impressive.
Triple option, man. Timeless classic.
Just works. Anyway, I think good stuff there. We mostly focused offense. I think that's because we both felt the defense is still playing very well for the most part. We were both also.
I am kind of bummed they gave up a touchdown to Wisconsin because, man, that in those conditions it should have been a shutout. But I'm not worried about it. I was just kind of like, man, to the Badgers, like really.
Back in June, I predicted a home shutout. And to clarify, someone in the comments, I sped through it a little bit on our Saturday reaction show. Would have been the first home shutout since 2012. I know they had a shutout against Purdue last week or last year.
Was that home 2012 shutout against Arizona?
Yeah, 49-0.
Yeah. I think Avery Patterson had a pick 6 in that game, or maybe had 2.
I couldn't tell you all the specifics of that. You may be
I'm gonna look that up, see how good my sicko knowledge is while you get to the next question.
Okay, jumping over here to the next question here from @RealKyleRody. Realistically, how much higher can the linebacker room ceiling get when they're fully healthy / more game reps? I don't know if this is a group that ceiling is much higher than what it is right now. If I'm being totally honest, like Bryce Betcher is what he is. I think he's probably been a little bit more maligned than I think is deserving at times from the fan base. I see it. I see him missing gaps, 4th down run play against Wisconsin that goes for like 18 yards. He just is like a soccer goalie and picks the wrong one and dives through it. And then whoop, there goes the back through the gap that he could have filled. I also think he's playing pretty well. Devin Jackson's playing better than he's getting credit for right now. I didn't think playing well at all early in the season. I think he's been, to me, decidedly better than Jerry Mixon, especially against the run, probably the last 2 or 3 games. I'm not going to sit here and say it's great, though. And I do think this is the biggest weakness on this defense. I don't know if the ceiling is going to change much. Like Dylan Williams, fun story against Rutgers. Thought he looked very explosive and intriguing. Didn't play at all against Wisconsin. Felt like that was a matchup that could have fit his skill set. So, I think we know who the cast of characters are. Bryce is what he is. Devin, I think we're seeing some growth on as the season plays out. Probably the same with Jerry. I just think these are also all guys that are in their 4th, 5th, 6th year in the program. I don't know if we're going to see a massive step taken from any of them.
Yeah, before I answer that, it wasn't Avery Patterson. There were 2 pick 6s in that Arizona game in 2012. So I at least had that part of it right. But
good stuff.
Yeah, the linebackers, I don't think they've been bad. It's just that the rest of the defense is playing at such a high level. It's like that scene in Moneyball when Billy is trading. I think he's talking about Jeremy Giambi. It's like, well, why do you want to trade Jeremy? He's making everybody else look bad. Like everybody else, or the rest of the team outside of the linebackers is Jeremy there. Like the defensive line is playing so well and has so many bodies that can make plays, and we've seen that this season. And the secondary just looks better and better every single week. They were great in this game. Like, I don't care what college quarterback you're going against. 1 of 12 to start the game passing is crazy good work. And you saw Dylan Thieneman and Aaron Flowers make plays that simply just haven't been made by Oregon safeties in the last several seasons on Saturday, and we've seen it throughout the year. So I think they've been great. Brandon Finney, of course, has been a stud. I was discussing this on my Monday show, Erik. What if Oregon had been able to land DJ Pickett as well? He is Brandon Finney South down there at LSU. And we'll monitor the situation. I don't anticipate anything, but like
Spencer, would it be a surprise to know his name is in a question on this show?
That would not. Nope, that wouldn't be a surprise. We'll get to that one. We'll table that. So bringing this back to the linebackers, I'm with you on Bryce Betcher. Like Bryce is a good player. I don't think he can be any better than he is. It's not that he's bad. He's just he's a converted safety who was not a big time recruited. This has been, a true. I know this conversation comes up mostly on Twitter with Washington fans, but the word development gets thrown around a lot, and Bryce Betcher is the quintessential example. He's going to be Oregon's leading tackler for a second straight season in all likelihood, and he's a guy who is not a high-level NFL draft capable sort of guy. I think Devin Jackson is the wild card in this spot because he does have a lot of NFL traits, and I think he has played much better in the last couple of weeks. And remember this as well, Erik. Again, this is a relative weakness compared to the rest of the defense that's just playing at such a high level. Oregon is top 10 in the country in yards per play allowed. The only statistic they're not good at and they're actually horrible at is red zone defense. They are opponents, I believe, are perfect this year in the red zone. And sure, you'd love to see that change. But when you look at the results of the Oregon defense, man, if something was actually as bad as it feels to some fans with the linebacker position, Oregon's defense wouldn't be this good because other teams would be able to exploit it. You can't hide an entire position group just being straight up bad at the second level of your defense. So I think Devin Jackson has played better. Mixon is really fast. He is not physical enough for, in my view, at this point, but the speed and playmaking is absolutely there. Bryce is physical, but is just not a guy that, I feel like Bryce Betcher is making tackles and winding up on his back a lot more than he drives a running back forward. And he's not like he's not making the play, but is he Noah Sewell out there that made a bunch of plays and drove guys back? Or this is going to be a throwback name of sorts. A healthy Justin Flo did this as well. Like Bryce just doesn't have that sort of ability. He's maximized what he does have, so he's a good player. But yeah, I think there's a little room for growth because Mixon can get more physical. Jackson can be more consistent, and he is. But no, I don't think this group at the end of the year is going to be radically different than what it is right now from a production standpoint.
I'm happy you brought up the season stats because if you pull it up, I think it gets almost misconstrued or misremembered. Like Indiana had 326 yards.
Yeah.
No, two teams have had 300 or more, and one of those is Northwestern, which had a 75-yard
touchdown run against the third stringers.
And only Penn State. There's three teams over 250 against this defense all season, and it was Northwestern, Penn State, a game that went to overtime, by the way.
I believe they've held 4 opponents under 100 yards passing. Pretty sure.
4, yeah, 4. Yeah.
Yeah, four opponents under 100 yards passing. I don't care what your schedule is. Under 100 yards passing is crazy work.
The other thing is here, just to put into perspective, and I'm going to go lean on PFF grades. Mileage may vary. That's my every single time I bring it up, fans will just tell me it's terrible. I get that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
In terms of Big Ten linebackers with qualifying snap counts, I have over 200 through 8 games, which feels fair. Bryce Betcher is 6th in the Big Ten PFF overall defensive grade. Jerry Mixon is 11th. Devin Jackson is 26th, but Devin Jackson, his last 3 games have been his best PFF grades. And the thing with Devin that has stood out to me, this was a guy who was missing some tackles early in the season. He had 4 over the first 5 games. His tackle grade was not very good. Last 3 games, no missed tackles. PFF tackle grade of 78.5, 80.2, 75.8. At least I think he does suffer a little bit like what you mentioned there with Bryce Betcher, and I totally agree of just like he's not the one driving the ball carrier down. It's more the other direction. At the same time, at least he's in the right spot, finishing the tackle, being involved in plays. Again, not going to say this is the strength of the defense. I think it's the weakness, but to Spence's point, I don't think there is a glaring weakness on this defense. And right now, I feel like this is a linebacker crew that, against better competition, can still be effective. Maybe not the best unit on the field, but still can be effective.
Yeah, and think about it. I'll give 2 kind of comparisons here. When Scotty Scheffler first broke into the golfing world, he was this unbelievable ball striker, and he had great hands. His chipping was really good around the greens, but his putting was like bottom third on in the world, you know? And so the storyline amongst broadcasters and fans going into every event was, well, if Scotty's putting is just average, everything else is so good, he's going to win. But is it going to be average? I think that's Oregon's linebacker core. If they're just solid, if they're just not a weakness, the rest of the defense is so good that I don't think it's a really big problem. Contrast that to last year, and I said going into that dreadful day in Pasadena, the biggest weakness for Oregon that I saw was the safety play. And Ohio State went right at him the entire game. I don't think that it is that level of a concern to where, and it's linebackers rather than safeties, not that there aren't, tactical things you can do to exploit that particular group. I don't think that the linebackers this year are as much of a weakness as the safeties last year. I don't think that a team that's going to go out and score 45 points somehow on this Oregon defense, and I don't know who could do that, frankly. If they were to find a way, I don't think it would be as simple as just go at the linebackers all the time as it was last year, which is, hey, put the safeties in coverage and in conflict, and they're not going to consistently make plays, and they didn't. So, yeah, I think that is a distinct difference this year compared to last season. That, like, yes, it's the third best unit, but it's not so bad that it's a glaring problem. Like, look at the defensive numbers. I just think literally the rest of the defense is making Oregon's linebackers look bad. There are so few mistakes made elsewhere and so many impact plays that when the linebackers make any mistake or have a lack of impact plays, it looks a lot worse than it is.
One last thing I'll hit and then we'll move on. But to your point about who could be the team to go for 45 or put a big number on Oregon, I think Indiana has the best offense among elite teams right now. They're third in scoring offense, sixth in total offense. The other teams around them, it's like USC. We can throw Texas Tech in if you want, I guess. But a lot of these teams up here are teams that obviously are not very well rounded. I don't know what their likelihood of being a team Oregon meets in the playoff is. And again, I'm not going to say it was picture perfect against the Hoosiers, but 30 points, 326 yards, that's enough most weeks if the offense is able to get it going. So
and the final 3 points there were off the Dante Moore interception late, down 7. That's not really on the defense. That's actually them doing their job, which is, hey, turnover in our own territory, like the Rutgers game. What do you need to do? Hold them to 3. You hold them to 3. So, yeah, I'm not worried at all about Oregon's defense. I think they're doing a lot of things really well, and Tosh Lupoi deserves a lot of credit for that. And I think has silenced a lot of the critics for the time being, and deservedly so, because that unit has played really well. And the Will Stein critics are out there. I get it. I'm not in that camp to the same degree as some Oregon fans are, but if you look at these two sides of the ball, yeah, the defense has been better than the offense this year consistently.
All right, third question. We'll hit this one, and then we'll head to a quick break from @UOR Matthews. How much are we missing Tez? It's concerning we don't have a quick-hitting bread-and-butter pass play to keep the chains moving. Dante appears confused by coverages, holding onto the ball, and no longer throwing shoulder fades. The offense feels out of sync more often than not. I wanted to focus primarily on the Tez question here. It doesn't. I agree that it doesn't feel like on third down and manageable, like in that 4 to 6 range, that they go really much of anything besides screen game, which is something that infuriates fans. I'm not as bothered by it because I've seen plenty of these work. Where you do throw the ball behind the sticks, and if it's blocked properly and with the speed Oregon has, I think those are advantageous situations. But there is kind of something to that. Let's find the guy who's just going to sit down in the zone, or a guy who's going to beat the slot corner, with a quick cut in or out for an in-breaking or out-breaking route, and just be open in the middle of the field. That's been very much absent here, and that's not to explain away everything Dante Moore related. I do think. And it almost kind of comes back to your point earlier about, like, just take a moment to appreciate what's been here before. When you mentioned Dylan and you mentioned Bo, veteran quarterbacks, as opposed to a Dante Moore. Tez Johnson is doing it in the NFL right now. Like 4 straight weeks, he's been one of the most impactful players.
Did you know he's Bo Nix's brother?
I haven't heard that said anywhere. It's crazy.
I know. I'll get some in-depth reporting on that and get back to you. But I heard that. I heard that over the weekend. I did actually hear that over the weekend. They weren't even in the same game.
Did they clarify if he was actually adopted or biological?
No, it was Kenny Albert was calling the Broncos game, I believe.
Mhm.
Or maybe he had the Bucks game. And I remember him saying, Bo Nix considers Tez Johnson like a brother. I said, uh-oh. Didn't do the full deep dive of the story there, Kenny.
Boy, oh boy. Thoughts on this though, because I do think
Yeah.
to get back to the question, and that has become like the Brock Osweiler 6'7" of this era.
Tariq Woolen ran a 4.27 at the NFL Combine.
Right. But thoughts on the absence of Tez and finding something in the middle of the field more frequent that is just available there, or something that just a more reliable third down option for Dante.
Yeah. I don't think if you put Tez Johnson in this offense, anything would be different. I don't. DeCorian Moore is really, really good. The receiving depth that Oregon has is fantastic. DeCorian Moore can get open in just about any spot, and Dante Moore looked for him on the fourth down early in the game after the onside kick. And if you look at that play, you know, what Oregon is missing from last year and what you're talking about with those spots, I get why you'd go to Tez, but the answer is they're missing Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix's experience. That's what it comes down to. So, you know, I went back and watched several times that 4th and 2 and was like, okay, why didn't this work? Like, what went wrong? Dante Moore got sacked. You could look and say the offensive line didn't give Dante Moore time. No, he had time to get through 2, maybe 3 progressions. So they motion in Gary Bryant, who's running a speed out at the sticks. He actually beats his guy, and Dante Moore comes off of it before, like, just didn't like the look of where the corner was positioned. Okay. His next progression, I don't know exactly where he's going to go. It's either to DeCorian Moore or Kenyon Sadiq. Kenyon Sadiq is running open across the field, and if he hits him in stride, Sadiq is going to make the first down, even with the safety coming downhill. He went to DeCorian Moore second in his reads and stayed there, never got off to Sadiq, and then the protection broke down because you can't ask guys to block for that long a time. So that's what's missing, is Gabriel and Nix made all the right reads in those spots. You think about the Ohio State game Dylan Gabriel had in the masterclass he put on in that one. Yeah, he made the throws and made the plays, but he was making the right reads over and over again. I think that goes overlooked for a lot of fans watching quarterback play. You know, they watch and just see, oh, he got sacked and nobody was open. Well, no. If he really trusted Gary Bryant in that spot, he would have cut it loose and it would have been a first down. If he had Sadiq in his mind more than, or if he'd seen the play correctly, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that Tez Johnson is what's missing. It's a quarterback that processes things correctly in those sequences, and sometimes Dante Moore does and sometimes he doesn't. I think that's just what, you know, I mentioned earlier. It's a growing pain with a young quarterback, and Oregon fans, I think, just have to accept that with Dante Moore.
I understand your point. I think I agree with 90% of it. I do think upgrading that slot receiver role from Gary Bryant to Tez would be impactful, especially when the margins are so small. And you kind of alluded to it even there, of like, if he trusted Gary Bryant fully, I would imagine if Tez Johnson were in that spot, maybe he does stick with him a little bit longer and trust him a little bit more. It's possible. I also totally agree with your assessment that the skill talent at receiver at Oregon is about as good as it's ever been. I think it's hard to argue that. Evan Stewart may be coming back soon. Like, maybe not even may. I think is coming back soon. There's some kind of buzz building. This is going to look a little different for whatever the stretch run is. Don't know if Evan's involvement is going to matter a ton in the regular season, but assuming this team does get to the playoff, that's going to change some things. But the underlying issue, which I think I totally agree with, having now watched the Wisconsin and Indiana games a little more closely, is you're right. There is a younger quarterback discrepancy. When he sees that first read and it's open, or he can find a read that's open and he can deliver the ball better than almost any quarterback I've seen at Oregon. It is impressive. The accuracy,
the arm talent's crazy. The arm talent is crazy good.
How quickly he gets it out. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm okay on the screen game, is I think he gets the ball out quicker in the screen game than any Oregon quarterback I've seen. Just that little flick of the wrist, sidearm, doesn't even have to set his feet. Like, that gives you time to get those players theoretically upfield. But I agree that there is, and this is young quarterback stuff. This is the case for why, even though he has all this arm talent, maybe he needs a fourth year of college football in 2026 to maximize it. That would be the case. We'll see where his head's at. We'll see what NFL teams truly think. I know there's a ton of buzz for first round. You don't usually see quarterbacks turn down first round draft grades or expectations very often. But this is kind of something we're starting to see now in these closer games where he's struggling a little bit. Some of it is protection issues. Some of it may be receivers not quite getting to where they need to be. But a lot of the time, it's a Dante Moore between the ears issue. And I think that's something that we'll be very curious to see and track. And that was, frankly, one of the reasons I was frustrated most that he was knocked out of that game, was to see how he would handle a little bit of that adversity, just a little bit more snaps against a defense that clearly had him kind of thinking a little bit, that had him kind of rushing decisions, that kind of forced him to be on his toes again. We saw against Indiana, he really unraveled, never really recovered. I was curious to see against the Badgers if we saw a second half where it kind of started to click and you started to get some confidence there. I think that would have been important for the young quarterback. Unfortunately, obviously, we did not get to see that take place. All right, 3 in. We'll take a quick break here, come back, hit the final 2 questions of the show, and send everybody on their merry little way. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. A couple more here left. We're going to start with this one here. This is from @Sean Morris, UO fan. This was actually from over on Blue Sky. I've been throwing these questions up on both social media platforms. It's a longer question here. Only got the first part in from Sean, but what about the game against Iowa concerns you most? For me, it's the fact that they discovered offensive confidence, or is it the fact that Oregon seems to always play poorly after a bye week? I'll let you go first on this, Spencer. I've got some thoughts, though.
Yeah, I think it's the road game against the Iowa defense, because the Hawkeyes offense has figured out how to play football, and that is a revelation in Iowa City. That is a welcome sight, a positive development, impressive, given how they started. You know, we've talked about the progression for Oregon's players and the team as a whole from the start of the year to what it might be at the end of this season. Iowa started this year, I believe Mark Gronowski threw for a combined 118, 20-ish yards in his first 2 games as a Hawkeye, and a lot of people in Iowa City, and I'm sure beyond, myself included, frankly, over on Locked On College Football, thought, yep, here we go, same old Iowa. This is just what it is. This is what they are. So change the faces, and it's all this, and it's not, because they can do that. But what's never been in question for the Hawkeyes and their head coach Kirk Ferentz, who's been there since 1999. That's when he took over as head coach. The defense, and with how Oregon looked against Wisconsin early on, with how they played against Indiana, and frankly, the offensive performance against Penn State, those were not offensive games that saw Oregon play to their full potential. Now, you put the Rutgers game in there as well, and no, Rutgers defense isn't good, but how should you look against that team? Exactly how they did. That was really after the first drive, which was pitiful. The offense played as well as you could possibly hope. They did everything right, good situationally, made good decisions, explosive throws. It was all there. But on the road, Iowa's off a bye as well. So they're at home. Crowd's going to be on fire. They are invigorated. They can, I'm sure, see a path to the playoff if they can go 10-2. They win this game against Oregon, and they're probably in control of their own destiny to make the playoff, because their losses are 5 points to Indiana and 3 points to Iowa State. And if you have a win against Oregon, I think it'll cancel out the Iowa State win. The Cyclones have regressed and are pulling back a bit this year. But Alabama lost to Florida State, who hasn't won a game yet in the ACC. And Bama's inside the top 5. So I think the precedent is there. Even though Iowa inexplicably isn't ranked this week, which is absurd, completely and totally absurd. This should absolutely be a top 25 matchup. But the AP poll is ridiculous. And I think that for Oregon's offense, it's an opportunity to have its best game in a big spot, because in the Indiana game, defense played well enough to win. Got you 7 points, got off the field when they needed to. Offense couldn't respond. Penn State, offense struggles in the first half, finds it a bit in the second, does well in overtime. That can't go overlooked. They scored 2 touchdowns there. But in these big spots, yeah, the defense has carried the way for the Ducks. And so I know that Iowa's defense is really good, really well coached and well schemed all the time. And it's going to be a challenge for Will Stein to try and go into Iowa City against a crowd that'll be on fire and score a bunch of points.
I remember when Stanford was Oregon's thorn in their side for a long time, and they just played a game that didn't let Oregon do what it did against everybody else, right? That's what I was going to do. And I think that's what makes me a little nervous, is this team's ability to thrive in an environment like that. And probably not even thrive is the right word, because I don't think anyone thrives, but just to have enough success to get it done. I still think this is a game that's extremely winnable. Be curious to see what the betting line looks like when it debuts. I know going into the season, Oregon was, I think, double-digit road favorites. Spencer,
yeah, they were. I'd be surprised if it's still there.
But my point is, like, we just saw what Oregon's offense, kind of how they struggled with Wisconsin, and the weather in the second half played a much bigger role than some people seem to want to give it credit for. But against Indiana, certainly, that's how Iowa plays football. It's going to be a lower scoring football game. This is one of the best defenses in the country this year. They've given up no more, surprisingly to some, maybe. Rutgers, 28 points, the most points they've allowed in a game all season. But in their two losses to Iowa State and Indiana, they've given up a combined 36 points. And those are kind of the premier games on their schedule this year. Penn State would have been, that was another low-scoring game, by the way, 25-24, but that was also Penn State out Drew Aller without James Franklin. Everybody kind of knew where things were at there. I just think I want to see how this team plays now on the road. Spencer made great points about that part. Kinnick is not a joke. People talk about this is one of the places when I was kind of getting introduced to the other Big Ten writers of like, where are the kind of sneaky, tough stadiums? This was one of the first ones that came up.
Kinnick to me feels like the Big Ten's version of Washington State.
Martin?
Yeah, stylistically, no. Like very, very different styles over the years, but it's just one of those places that if you go in there and win big, you have earned the right to feel good about your football team.
And I don't know if I'm expecting them to win big because, again, defensively, it's been incredibly impressive. They're holding essentially everybody 50 to 100 yards below their season averages. And I guess the other thing, and we kind of touched on it already a little bit with linebacker play, we know this is not an Iowa offense that's going to throw the football. You hit it earlier. They've gotten over 200 yards passing once all season, and that was against UMass in a game that they won 47-7. Even in the games like they most recently beaten Wisconsin and Minnesota, 37-0, 41-3. Have had a combined 250 yards passing in those two games. Like, we know what they're going to do.
Scoring at least. Scoring.
And actually, this last game with Minnesota, they won 41-3 with 274 yards of total offense,
that's impressive. I actually didn't know the total was that low because that game got out of hand so quickly. I just realized that I'd made my second worst game pick of the year over on my college football show. The worst one being Illinois to beat Indiana. Yeah. Those two games combine 104-13.
Nailed it.
This
job is hard sometimes. But my point is, like, you know they're going to run the football, and if there is a weakness, it would be those linebackers, and I will be curious to see how they stack up. Like, if we're just getting to like what individual unit am I most concerned about, it's probably still quarterback. But if we're going defense, it's definitely linebacker, and I will be curious to see how they stack up because this is not an offense that's going to really. They're not going to really trick you. You kind of know what's going. And it's a matter of being able to, even if it's predictable, can you stop it?
Can I throw one at you? I'm with you on the quarterback and the linebackers. You know, Iowa's defense, really well schemed. They're going to study that Indiana tape for 2 weeks and figure out how they can get in Dante Moore's head and rattle his cage and all that. And we've talked about the linebackers on this show. Can I throw the offensive line and pass protection at you and say, fair. Hey, I think the interior has actually been really good in that regard, but the tackles, I am not sitting here saying they have been terrible. I cannot also come on here and say they've been great. There have been some moments that you look up and go, well, that wasn't very good. Like, I don't know what happened with, the sack early in the game against Wisconsin. Isaiah World just got out of his stance late. It's like he didn't know or hear the snap count. It was weird. It almost looked like he thought they were going on 2. They went on 1, and then he realized, oh, crap, I have to go and try. And then it was too late. So those sorts of moments, and I think Dante Moore has done a lot to keep the sack total for Oregon in terms of the number of sacks they've allowed this year lower than it might otherwise be, because he is incredibly mobile and has done a good job evading pressure at times or getting the ball out on time to avoid some sacks. I think Oregon's tackles have been solid this year, but not as good as last year. And you're missing a Josh Connerly right about now going into this game against Iowa, because Isaiah World, again, has not been, below average or substandard, but he hasn't been exceptional either. And he's had a lot of highs and lows. And I feel great about Poncho and Emmanuel Prenon. The more I watch those guys every week, I don't know if you see this, Erik, those two look like NFL dudes. But I mean, Prenon, I think, is actually Oregon's best offensive lineman. And Poncho is, I don't know how he doesn't get his name into the Remington Award conversation with how I think he's improved against the run this year, and he's allowed like 2 sacks in his 2 years starting at center. So, I think that World and Harkey and the rotation with Janoris Wilson, I think those guys have been iffy. Not bad, but so in pass protection. And you're going to go against an Iowa front that is prideful and rested and going to get after you in this spot as much as they possibly can.
Poncho, I think, is only given up 1 sack in 2 seasons, by the way, according to
he's so good.
Yeah.
Bringing him back for 2026 would be awesome, but it's looking like it's going to be difficult.
And he went into the year and was pretty honest about it. I remember asking him at Oregon's media day in Eugene, and he was kind of just like, if everything goes right, I'm gone, basically. Like he almost essentially gave me if I have a Jackson Powers Johnson kind of season, if I win the Remington, the team does a really good job, I'm going to be off to the NFL. We'll see.
Uncle Phil, open up that checkbook, pal.
He just doesn't pay rent. Yeah. He just doesn't. Phil just really put it down. I mean, I'm just disappointed with the lack of resources this program has. I mean, what's happening across the country.
It's incredible that Dan Lanning is succeeding with as little support as he's got from the outside. Isn't it? It's unbelievable.
It really is. It's honestly a disappointment. All right, last question here from at K Stokes. Kind of in the same vein of money.
Oh yeah.
K Stokes 04. With the firing of Brian Kelly, could we see any recruits that are currently committed or even on the roster, aka DJ Pickett, commit to Oregon and Dan Lanning? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thank you, Kyle, I believe it is, for using the hashtag. You brought up his name earlier.
I did.
Boy, would this be fun.
I tell you what, you mentioned earlier, and I agree, the receiver talent at Oregon last couple of years better than it has ever been. Oregon, when I was growing up, never sniffed having a legit production, a legitimately productive receiver in the NFL. Troy Franklin had 87 yards and 2 touchdowns from Bo Nix, of course, who I'm told is related to Tez Johnson, who also is starting to find his footing with the Buccaneers. I know, first time. But and then you look at that Evan Stewart is in the room, and that DeCorian Moore is there, and he's going to play on Sundays one day. It's awesome. It is really, really awesome to see. I bring that up because the same thing looks to be applying to the secondary. Like, even if you thought, and I think we all did, that Brandon Finney would be good, for him to be this good as a true freshman is so abnormal, even for a recruit as highly rated as him. Because remember, Naeem Offord was the higher rated recruit of the two. Finney was a late addition to the 5-star club. Offord was the number 1 defensive back, and Naeem Offord is starting to come along. I thought he played well on Saturday, almost picked up his first sack on a corner blitz. But he is what even highly rated true freshmen usually look like. A guy like that is playing, he's seeing the field, but there's still some things to work out. And for Offord, it's been being in the right coverage. He's had 2 or 3 coverage busts this year where he's going with the guy on the outside and he's supposed to stay in his third. At least that's the way it looks to me on film. But, he is still got a lot of room to grow. How much better could Brandon Finney be? How much better could he get? I don't know. So the likelihood of DJ Pickett going there would be crazy, because you might force out a starting caliber corner to the portal for the first time, because DJ Pickett has also been that sort of guy. And it's awesome if you just have the recruiting conversation to think about the fact that they got Finney and they got offered, and Dorian Brew, I think you said, is hurt this year, and
he's
probably
supposedly becoming available now, but we haven't seen him.
Yeah, exactly. But just the secondary talent, you think about guys going forward like Jet Washington that's going to come into the fold. He looks like he could be awesome. Aaron Flowers, really good. I just think the secondary talent is absurd, and DJ Pickett would immediately start for Oregon at the other corner slot. I think Theron Johnson would be relegated to
he doesn't have
special teams role.
He doesn't have eligibility next year, so we don't have.
Oh no, yeah, no. I'm saying if you took DJ Pickett and put him on Oregon's roster right now, I don't think Theron Johnson would see the field. I think you would see a little bit of Ife Obadegwu, because they do like to rotate guys, which I understand, and I think has obviously worked out. Hard to argue with the results, but yeah, the likelihood that DJ Pickett go slim. It's slim. If he were to go in the portal, Oregon's name would be at the top of the list of interested candidates, or at least they should be. But the way that I look at this is the same way I talked about Dallas Wilson at Florida, who is not at the portal or in the portal, and I don't think he's going. I think he's going to stay as long as DJ Lagway stays, is what I was told. But if Oregon were in this spot, the conversation you and I would be having, Erik, is, dear Oregon's NIL collective, give X player whatever he wants. DJ Pickett is one of those guys for LSU. Like, a coach that they're going out to try and find would love nothing more than to have a just shut down corner with 2 years of eligibility left and 1 season of high level production. So is it likely? No, it is not. Is it impossible? Also no, because Oregon was one of his finalists.
Not only was Oregon one of his finalists, the word on the street going into, he pushed his commitment back, I think, like a week or two. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline, a couple of, whatever it was last year. And he's going to Oregon. We had all the content prepped in the back and the admin. I think, may have actually recorded a reaction podcast, Matt and I, that never saw the light of day. Like, he's going to Oregon. And obviously he's at another school now, and he's been incredibly impactful. And I probably tend to agree with the idea that the very cream of the crop, top tier talent, like DJ Pickett on LSU's roster, he's one of the 3 or 4 most valuable guys. I saw ESPN put together, like, who are the 5 players on the roster that the new coach has to retain. And he was, I believe, number 1, but certainly in that list of 5 names. So I don't know what the likelihood of him coming to Oregon is, but I think you're right. I think if he does hit the portal, Oregon becomes the favorite. And to put into context what that would look like, Finney is currently first nationally. This is PFF's coverage data in yards allowed just yards allowed in coverage this year. The stat continues to grow. It becomes more impressive every week. 3 receptions allowed on 21 targets for 28 yards. 7th nationally is DJ Pickett. 8 receptions allowed, 82 yards. You would be pairing 2 first-round talents at corner together. You might still have 2 first-round talents if we see Naeem Offord and Ife Obadegwu develop. But Pickett's the better player. He's proven that at this point. And if you can find a way to get him, you upgrade that corner room in a way that clearly forces one, maybe both of those 2 guys to look elsewhere, and that's unfortunate. But I don't think you're really feeling too bad about yourself when you have maybe the 2 best corners in the entire country working opposite of each other. I think it's a pipe dream personally, because I think, like we said, most likely he stays at LSU. But that's going to be one to be monitoring here as we get into, December, when the portal opens and all these guys start jumping in. What's going on with DJ Pickett? In terms of, just to kind of finish this question here and get off the DJ Pickett component, the only player on LSU's 2026 commitment list that Oregon was a player for was Deuce Gerald's defensive lineman out of Georgia. Oregon could use a player like this. This is 24/7 Sports composite 10th best defensive lineman in the country. Visited Oregon June 13th. Oregon certainly was a finalist here. Wasn't a.
I think Oregon was at least in the final 3, if not the top 2.
Yeah, I was going to say it was not a DJ Pickett where we were like, hey, let's write 3 or 4 things breaking down the commitment. But it was on the radar that we needed to be prepared, at least a couple weeks before that was announced this past summer. Could very well see Oregon getting involved there. They've kind of been up and down with the defensive line recruiting this cycle. This would be a name to certainly circle back on. And he is not, we're talking about DJ Pickett, like priorities. This is the number 9 recruit ranking wise in LSU's class, which is, again, a top 11 class, one of the best in the country. Could be a guy that's maybe more available than you think. Also will be not easy to pull him out there. I mean, the 5 schools he visited during the summer, I'm just pulling this up here. LSU,
Pickett you're talking about?
No, I'm back to Gerald's.
Oh, okay.
The 5 schools he visited: LSU, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Ole Miss. So going to be competitive if he does become available, but Oregon would certainly be a player there and a name to know. The other 2026 commitments, I do not recognize as targets that Oregon got very deep with.
Yeah, I would. I'd say that DJ Pickett would be more likely than Dallas Wilson. Now, that's like saying my chances of getting a date tonight with Sydney Sweeney are lower than, or they're slightly higher than with Emma Watson. So, it's
marriage related or something. One of those.
I think Emma Watson might be. I don't know.
I can't say it's ever come up on the podcast before.
Yeah, no, I'm not shocked that it hasn't. Honored to bring that to the audience for the first time, but that's to say that I'm not anticipating it. But if the opportunity were to arise, boy, all over it, all over it.
This is going to be an absolutely wild transfer portal year, because this is far from the only good job that's open right now. We're not even to November. And if you look around, there's some pretty good jobs that may also open. There's also the fun domino effect of, hey, like a thought that has crossed my mind is I've seen Jeff Brom mentioned prominently for both Florida and LSU. If that happens, Louisville's opening up. Somebody on
some people would be happy about that. Not me. I'm just saying there are some that would go, oh, well, now I want that to. And hey, Jeff Brom, ball coach, man. He is a ball coach and a really, really good one. And yeah, if I were Will Stein looking for, let me say this first. I don't see how Oregon goes through this upcoming coaching carousel and is completely unaffected. The staff retention they have from last year to this year,
totally.
No way that they do that again. I'll be surprised if one or multiple of Chris Hampton, Will Stein, those two, maybe even Rashad Samples
would be a name to worry about, I think.
Yeah.
He was courted a little bit this year.
I think all 3 of those names are going to get traction because there's so many big-time jobs. But on the Will Stein front, the discussion that has always come up with Oregon fans I've talked to about on my show about this is like, why would he take this job when he could wait for another job? Louisville's a good job. He's an alum, and if Jeff Brom bolts, I bet Will Stein is no worse than a top 2 or 3 target for the Cardinals there. I think his name would be very, very high on that. People like alums. That's not unique to Oregon or anywhere else. Like, that's just a common theme. Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, Scott Frost was hired to Nebraska. Obviously, one of those worked out a little bit better than the other, but I think that's absolutely a job. If I'm Will Stein, thinking about what would I want my first job to be, good place to go, a school that I'm familiar with, in a conference that is not impossible for that program to win at. That's kind of the challenging part of whoever takes the UCLA job is, what can you really do at UCLA? We might find out. It might just wind up being Tim Skipper, but yeah, that'd be a pretty good first head coaching job. And does he love Louisville as much as Kenny Dillingham loves Arizona State? Maybe, but it would definitely feel like that. And Dillingham, who I think has endeared himself to Oregon fans as much as any coach that was only in Eugene for one season in the history of Oregon football.
Can't argue that take. I mean, I really
Every
don't even
Oregon,
know.
anytime it comes up, I come across Oregon fans online or in person. Man, I love what Dillingham's doing. Man, it's awesome. I'm like, he was the OC for one. He wasn't even there for the bowl game because he went to take that job. And fans are like, man, I love because he's awesome.
Spencer, he wasn't even really there in Corvallis. Basically.
Yeah, that's how it felt in a couple moments. But yeah,
and if it's not Louisville, it might be somewhere else for Will. Again,
Oklahoma State.
There's going to be there's a lot of jobs open, and then again, there's the domino effect of like Vanderbilt's coach. Is it Charles Lee?
Clark Lee.
Clark. He's a real hot name. Is a job at Vanderbilt become something that's attractive? That's an SEC job. It's not a upper echelon. I mean, they're playing like it currently. Is that a position where you go, hey, they've proven they got resources. Maybe they want to take a shot at some kind of young hotshot offensive coordinator who, again, despite what some Oregon fans seem to think, is very well thought of nationally. That's, again, back in his neck of the woods, and he's from Louisville, went to school there, grew up there. I think it's going to be a surprise to me if he's retained. And one thing, we'll kind of finish it here. This is not reporting. This is just somebody brought this up to me in a text a couple of days ago. Is it possible that all of this insane coaching carousel going on, all these jobs moving around, that some of these Oregon coaches have been on their phones with their agents a little bit more than normal? I'm not saying anyone's leaving, but maybe there's just like a 30 to 40 minutes a day that are spent doing something other than specifically coaching this football team. And that's going to sound probably made out the wrong way, but just like I know from personal experience, like I was going through buying the condo that I'm currently shooting this podcast in, and that was taking 30 to 40 minutes of my time away from my job. And I wouldn't say my work ethic was quite what it should have been then. I'm not suggesting that they're not working hard, but is there just some possibility that they're tracking a lot of these opportunities that are open, talking to their agents a little bit more than normal? Just a thought.
I think it's incredibly reasonable. I don't see Tasha's name get tossed around a bunch.
Defense has played better than the offense for reasons, Spence.
Yeah. Hey, you can connect those dots if you'd like. I don't think it's unreasonable at all. And I talked on my Monday show that Dan Lanning is not leaving. He's made that very clear.
I want to make it clear. I'm not suggesting that at all. He's not even on the betting board for the LSU job.
He was down at 66-1.
Oh, he was on it. I just saw one of the.
Yeah, there was a long list that got tweeted. He's not one of the top candidates because, Kurt Cignetti's name isn't getting thrown around for the same reason. It's not as recent with Lanning, but the commitment to the school, the extension from the athletic department, the rate at which he's compensated, all that is making it very clear those two guys are not available. But Will Stein, yeah, and I don't know if Will Stein is going to be someone that gets looked at for the LSU job. But yeah, I hadn't thought about the Braum domino until you mentioned it. And I think that'd be really, really logical. And certainly Louisville will look for other candidates, and that's a good job. And, a school that I do think is capable of making the college football playoff in the ACC. I don't know if you win a national championship, but you go to the playoff in the 12-team era and then just wait for the playoff to go to 24 teams. And all you got to do is roll out of bed and make the playoff. But that's a different conversation. So, yeah, I think that'd be a job. If I'm Will Stein, I would 100% go and try to go the Kenny Dillingham route back to the alma mater and in the one of the two relatively weaker, not as big of a gap as some people think, but of the Power Four, ACC and Big 12, I think it's easier to go from top to bottom. And Louisville's not even at the bottom right now. They beat Miami a couple weeks ago in a Cristobal special. So I think that if that job comes open, if I'm Will Stein, yeah, I'd put my hat in the ring.
I thought we were going to wrap it, and then it just dawned on me. Another name that's been tied to a lot of these vacancies is John Summerall, Tulane's coach.
Yeah.
Chris Hampton connections there. That's where he came from. Just not doing the unhealthy thing of bringing up jobs that may open or may not open at this point of the year, just to have the discussion. Obviously, zero reporting in any of this, but just throwing it out there.
Here's the interesting thing. Eric, I do that all the time. Here's
we're paid to talk on for like 3 hours a week. We're gonna have to say some stuff that's not totally credible.
Here's the interesting thing about the Hampton angle. He was the defensive coordinator at Tulane and is the co-DC, not the play caller at Oregon.
True.
Does that lead him to say my next stop is being a head coach, or does it lead him to think my next stop is being a defensive coordinator at this caliber of school, like a Virginia Tech or Oklahoma State or somewhere like that, UCLA, wherever, where he takes on play calling duties.
He and Will go to Louisville together, something like that.
I got a question about that on my show one time a while back, and I don't think it is impossible. Coaches very much lean into familiarity and people they know, and there's a lot of sound reasoning to that. I'm going to work with this coach because I know he's good. It can be a drawback. Lincoln Riley with Alex Grinch, set the USC program back a couple of years, and then they hired a real DC, and what do you know? USC is a good team. Who could have possibly foreseen Alex Grinch wasn't going to be good after he stunk at Oklahoma? I can't believe it. I can believe it. So there's both sides to that particular coin for coaches, but if Will Stein gets the Louisville job, there's no way he doesn't sit down with Chris Hampton, have a conversation about coming to be the defensive coordinator and tell him, you're going to be the only guy. There's no co-DC. You're going to call the plays. You're going to have these duties. Here's what your salary will be. And it'll probably be more than what he's getting at Oregon right now. I mean, it might be comparable because I'm sure he's pretty well paid. But I think that if you're a full-time DC at a Power 4 school, yeah, you probably make more than being the co-DC at Oregon.
That's going to wrap it there. Fun conversation with my guy, Spencer McLaughlin, running through a bunch of Oregon stuff, finished with some kind of, I don't even know what we want to call that, some coaching carousel conversation.
Coaching carousel madness.
With some Oregon implications. Thought that was a lot of fun. We will be back on this podcast on Wednesday. Got a little roundtable discussion with myself, John Evans, and the Lookout Tyson Alger will be joining our podcast. That'll be fun. So we're going to have a little 3-person show doing some takeaways on Wednesday. So don't miss that podcast. Thank you very much to the Locked On Ducks, Spencer McLaughlin, for jumping on here, and for Erik Skopil. This is signing off. Talk to you later, folks.